Anaya had always been the kind of woman others admired: quiet strength, unwavering loyalty, and a heart full of warmth. People in her small town often referred to her as the good woman. She never asked for much, never made demands, and certainly never doubted the man she had built her life with. Married to Ravi for 8 years, she believed their bond was rooted in something deeper than routine. They had been best friends once, sharing childhood laughter, teenage dreams, and grown-up promises whispered on long walks home. Every morning, Anaya packed his lunch, ironed his shirts, and left him soft notes tucked into his pockets. She did these things without expectation. Love, to her, wasn't about keeping score. Ravi had struggled with his business for years, and she had held everything together while he found his footing. Late nights became normal. She trusted him. How could she not? His tired smiles and distracted affection were just signs of stress. Or so she believed. Her world revolved around subtle sacrifices. She turned down promotions to manage the home better. She skipped weekend gatherings to make time for Ravi's unpredictable schedule. When people praised her devotion, she smiled, never revealing the small cracks forming inside her. Her happiness was tethered to his, and she had convinced herself that love meant enduring, even when it got heavy. But lately, something felt off. There was a lingering scent on his shirt one evening. Not her perfume. A soft, floral trace that didn't belong in their home. She had paused, fingers brushing over the fabric, heart thudding once before she reasoned it away. Maybe someone at work? A client? She didn't want to seem paranoid. She laughed it off when her friend Mira mentioned Ravi seemed more distracted than usual. "He's just tired," Anaya had replied, though she'd started noticing the late-night calls, the abrupt endings to conversations, and the way his phone never left his side anymore. Once, she reached for his phone absent-mindedly to check the time, and his reaction had been instant, tense, sharp, overprotective. He had smiled after, tried to pass it off as a joke, but something about his eyes didn't settle right with her. The warmth she used to feel around him began to fade, replaced by the chill of doubt creeping in. Still, she clung to faith. She baked his favorite dessert one night, waiting up for him long past midnight. When he arrived, she asked how his day went. He barely looked up. "Busy," he muttered, eyes on his phone. She nodded, pretending the silence didn't sting. It was the smallest details that began to scream the loudest. The second toothbrush she hadn't bought, a change in his cologne, the way he hesitated before saying, "I love you." She never accused, never questioned. Instead, she stayed quiet, watching, listening, feeling the weight of something unspoken press harder on her chest. In the mirror, she didn't see a woman losing her husband. She saw someone who had given everything and was now being quietly erased. And for the first time, a thought she never allowed herself to have took root. What if being good wasn't enough? Anaya woke up before sunrise, as always, but her routine felt heavier. Something inside her had shifted, though she hadn't said a word. She noticed the silence, more than ever now. Ravi's voice no longer held warmth. His kisses were hurried, his touch brief. Each moment felt rehearsed. She began moving through her days with quiet eyes, watching him. No more assumptions. No more excuses. The messages on his phone weren't hard to find. She never went looking, but one morning as he showered, his phone lit up with a name she didn't recognize: Nikita. The message read, "Last night was worth it. Can't stop thinking about you." Her fingers froze. Her mind didn't. Everything fell into place. Every late meeting, every cold look, every unexplained change. The truth had arrived with brutal clarity. She didn't cry. She didn't even gasp. Instead, she sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor, feeling the sharpness of betrayal cut through everything she had believed about love. The man she loved had chosen someone else, not just in body but in attention, in time, in care. It wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate, ongoing, repeated. Later that day, she opened their wedding album. Not to reminisce, but to remind herself. Every photo told a lie now. Smiles that meant nothing. Promises spoken with no intention of being kept. She thought about the vows he made and how she believed each word like scripture. She remembered standing beside him, eyes full of trust. That trust was now ash. She didn't confront him right away. What was the point of screaming at someone who no longer valued her presence? She needed to understand something first. Why? Why would someone betray a woman who had never done anything but love him unconditionally? In the days that followed, she watched him more carefully. He laughed while texting. He stepped out to take calls. He came home late and offered mechanical excuses. She replied with nods, calm and cool, while something inside her detached completely. She began answering his lies with silence.
It was safer that way.
She recalled every moment she had defended him to others, every time she had quieted her doubts because love told her to believe. But now, that belief felt like foolishness. The truth was cruel but necessary. She had been loving him alone for a long time. One night, she found an old letter she had written to him during their second anniversary. Full of hope, full of dreams. She read it with steady hands, then tore it into pieces and let them fall into the trash. That wasn't her anymore. That version of Anaya didn't survive the truth. She no longer waited for explanations. She no longer feared the truth. She accepted it. And in that acceptance, she discovered a painful freedom.
She had lost something, yes.
But she had also found the courage to stop pretending. Ravi had broken the marriage, but Anaya was done breaking herself to keep it whole. Anaya stopped waking up early to make breakfast. She no longer folded Ravi's shirts or reminded him to take his vitamins. The small acts of care that once defined her had faded. She moved like a ghost through her home, present but unreachable. Ravi noticed. He asked if something was wrong, but she only smiled faintly and said, "Nothing." Her silence was louder than any accusation. He didn't push. Maybe he already knew. She started spending more time outside the house. At first, she didn't know where to go. Then, one afternoon, she wandered into a community center she used to volunteer at years ago. There, she met Arjun, a quiet man with kind eyes who led support groups. He was a widower, not particularly charming, but sincere in a way that felt safe. Their conversations were simple. He never asked about her marriage. He only asked how she was sleeping, if she was eating, if she still painted. No one had asked her those things in years. She didn't tell him about the betrayal. Not yet. But in his presence, she found a strange comfort. Someone who saw her without needing anything from her. She started painting again. Nothing elaborate, just shapes, color, motion. Something about putting herself on a canvas made the silence inside her less suffocating. Ravi started noticing the changes. She no longer asked where he was going. She didn't wait up. Her eyes no longer softened when he walked in. He tried to be affectionate again. Bought flowers. Suggested a dinner date. She declined. Politely, without emotion. He began to fumble, offering apologies for being distant, saying work had been stressful, that things had gotten confused.
She didn't react.
He wanted her to scream, to cry, to demand explanations. But she gave him none of that. One evening, she sat across from him at the table and said, "I know about her." His face froze, but she didn't wait for lies. "You don't have to explain. It's done." He tried to reach for her hand. She pulled away, not out of anger, but finality. It was the cleanest break she'd ever made. She didn't go to Arjun for validation. Instead, she continued building herself in private. She started running in the mornings, made new recipes, read poetry. Her world was no longer wrapped around Ravi. It was expanding without him. And Arjun? He remained steady. He showed up when she needed quiet, disappeared when she needed space. No pressure, no demands. She wasn't falling in love. Not yet. But she was starting to understand what it felt like to be seen, to be heard without conditions. The pain of betrayal hadn't vanished. But she was learning that healing didn't require revenge or rebound. It required presence. And for the first time in a long time, Anaya was present, in her choices, in her silence, in her slow return to herself. The pieces were still scattered, but she was no longer afraid to pick them up. 6 months passed. Anaya had moved into a small apartment with pale blue walls and no memories attached. There was no wedding photo above the bed, no his and hers coffee mugs, no silence waiting to be filled. It was hers, every corner, every choice. Her life was no longer built around someone else's habits. She made her own coffee, sat by the window with books, and let the afternoons pass without waiting for anyone to come home. She had finished her manuscript the week before, a collection of essays about healing, heartbreak, and identity. Not a bitter account, but a clear one.
Honest.
She titled it Good Woman, not as a claim, but as a reclamation. She was tired of being seen as the kind of woman who endured quietly. She wanted to be the kind who chose herself. Ravi had called twice in the past month. The first time, she ignored it. The second time, she picked up. He apologized. Not defensively, not dramatically, just plainly. He said he had ruined something sacred. That he had thought she would never leave. That he thought being a good woman meant she would forgive anything. She didn't interrupt him. When he was done, she replied, "I forgive you, but I don't belong to you anymore." She meant it. There was no hatred in her voice, no trace of the woman who used to tremble under betrayal. Only clarity. Forgiveness wasn't about giving him peace. It was about releasing the weight of him from her life. She hung up and didn't feel the need to cry. It was over. Fully, finally. Her days were slower now, and that was a gift. She and Arjun still met at the community center sometimes. He had read one of her essays and told her, "You write like someone who's survived fire." She smiled but said nothing. There was no new romance blooming, just a mutual respect. They didn't talk about love. They talked about life.
Grief. Growth.
Silence. That was enough for now. She had stopped measuring time by pain. She stopped looking for closure in other people. The healing came from small moments, finishing a book, waking up without dread, smiling at her own reflection. She had learned that strength wasn't loud. It was quiet, consistent, and deeply personal. On a cool evening, she stood on her balcony, watching the sky shift. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for someone to come back. She wasn't proving anything. She was simply there, whole, unashamed, alive. Her story wasn't about infidelity. That was just a chapter. The real story was in what came after. The rebuilding, the rediscovery, the decision to choose herself every single day. She hadn't stopped being a good woman. She had just stopped being good for someone who didn't know her worth. And in the end, that made all the difference.